So welcome to Intro to HTML. We are going to be building a landing page today. And one thing also I would love to call out is I want to thank everyone here at the library. I also want to thank our QC Byte folks for joining us. And I also wanted to say happy Juneteenth. Really exciting that this is now a federal holiday. So really, really excited that you all are taking your time out to spend this with QC Bytes. So before we
And
get started,
there are a lot of Juneteenth events happening today, by the way. So just wanted to call that out and definitely just do a quick search. But Charlotte is hosting several Juneteenth events around the city.
yeah, thanks, Louise. Yeah, so getting into intros, so I will be your HTML teacher for today's class. Just to give you a little bit about me, these are some cool things that I've worked on. You'll see here during my time as a front-end developer. I did front-end development for about 5 years and professionally, still do it on and off whenever I feel like coding. I now have made my way into product management as a independent consultant. And also some things I like are HTML, SAS, JavaScript, Node.js, and Unreal Engine 5. I'm starting to learn that one since that just came out. And also, this is my cute and lovable cat, Luna. I love talking about her. You might see her in the video at some point today. She likes to pop in and join us, so you might be seeing her. So I also had a very non-traditional career path. Actually, my first time and exposure into HTML was a class just like this. And that really started me off on my journey to learning web development. So I thank the teachers as well who got me started. And I encourage you throughout the class to just continually ask myself, ask Louise and the CML library members for any type of help you may need moving forward. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Louise.
Hi, okay, thank you. So, yes, I am Louise Clark. I am, that title right there is a certified professional in accessibility core competencies, which speaks to my passion to make the web and all digital products accessible for everyone. I also had a non traditional career path. I started boot camp, I think, when I was 40. And switched from being a professor of history to a front end developer. And now I am also an application developer with a wonderful group called Grayshore. Christina and I both work for them or with them. So that's very exciting. I was following Christina's lead, so I'm sharing my two doggies. I have two puppies. They're about 4 months old right now, Kenai and Coda. And they're miniature schnauzers, which I love. And then tech stuff that I like, aside of HTML, which I love because it is, and you will find out, a lot like writing and thinking about content structure. I also like thinking about how things work in an application or a website, how people interact with them. I love JavaScript because that gives me those interactions. You will learn this term, but Ali, the accessibility, and I also like thinking about the ethics of tech and all different types of spheres like accessibility and artificial intelligence, AI. So that's me.
Great. So just going over today's agenda briefly, from 9 to 9:45, we're really going to be going over the majority of the slides that you see here. I will be talking through the basics of HTML. Louise will be speaking on the importance of accessibility. And also one thing is, if you have a question you want to ask, please use that raise hand option that we used earlier. That to me will be the biggest ally here for you being able to ask questions to Louise and myself during this time. If you have any questions at all, or if you don't want to raise your hand, feel free to drop it in the chat and one of us will go ahead and answer as well. Also, one thing to take note on is I'll also be sharing the slides and the code at the end of class. So if you just want to sit back and really absorb this information, that's one way to go about it. If it helps you to take notes, go for it. And then also, if you want to hands-on code, that would be great. Otherwise, don't worry, we'll be sharing this at the end of class. So wanted to preface that. We'll also be sliding in a 5-minute break there for us to relax, get our bearings together before we then start getting into coding. Also, one of the prerequisites was being able to get on Glitch and create an account. So if you haven't done that yet, that 5-minute break would be the perfect time to do that as well. And then at the very end, Louise will go ahead and talk about some really helpful browser plugins for your accessibility needs. And yeah, that's it. So we will now get into part 1, which is HTML basics. Okay, so HTML consists of a series of elements which you use to enclose or wrap different parts of the content to make it appear a certain way or act a certain way. So the enclosing tags, these items that you see here, the enclosing tags can make a word or an image hyperlink to somewhere else. So such as linking out to a web page, it can italicize words, it can make the font bigger or smaller, and so on. So for example, take this following line. We have a P tag, and P stands for paragraph. So the P here is the opening tag, and the P with the /, that is the closing tag. So here we're saying within that paragraph, my cat is very grumpy, which she can be sometimes if she's hungry. So next, just to give you a little bit deeper dive into that, the main parts of our element are as follows. So again, we have that opening tag. The tag consists of the name of the element. So in this case, P. It's wrapped in an opening and closing angle brackets. So that's what you see here. These are those angle brackets. This states where the element begins or starts to take effect. So in this case, where the paragraph begins. Now you'll see the closing tag, and this is the same as the opening tag, except it includes a / before the element name. How you place this is also important. It has to go in between the brackets. You see here, it has to go in between the brackets, but just before that P. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So keep that in mind as well too. Failing to add a closing tag is one of the standard beginner errors that can often lead to strange results. So just remember, whenever you open a tag, you've got to close it at the end of your sentence or context. Otherwise, you're going to get some weird layouts. And then the content that you see here, this is the content of the element. So in this case, it's just text for us. And then the element is the opening tag and the closing tag, as well as the content within that comprise of the element. So everything that you see within here, all of this is considered an element. And you'll hear that pretty frequently throughout your coding journey, people referring to elements or tags. Okay. So we also have attributes, and we're not going to get into a lot of this except on the accessibility side for this week, or sorry, for this class. The main thing though that I want y'all to take away is attributes contain extra information about the element that you do not want to appear in the actual content. So here, class is the attribute name, and editor note is the attribute value. The class attribute allows you to give the element a non-unique identifier that can be used to target it. This also applies to any other elements with the same class value. So if I had two elements, one was a p tag and say one was a list, and I had that class editor note, that means whatever class style, for example, that I gave it would apply to that because it had that editor note class. And that's something that we'll touch base on even more in depth as we get into our part 2, which is our CSS class. That's when we get to do fun things like styling our web page. Okay, so next is nesting elements. So you'll see here we have a element within an element. So here is the p tag that says my cat is, and then we have our first opening tag of strong, very, and then closing tag strong, grumpy, closing paragraph. So you can put elements inside other elements too. And this is something that's called nesting. So for example, if we wanted to state that our cat is very grumpy, we would wrap the word very in a strong element, which means that the word is to be strongly emphasized. It does not mean, oh, this word strong, that means it's strong. No, it actually means strongly emphasized. So that means I want to see it bolded, as you see here. So don't forget to close the strong element before closing your paragraph element, right? For this, we are really just wrapping it around this single word very to bold that word very. All right, and next we have empty elements. So empty elements contain two attributes, but there is no closing image tag and no inner content. So this is where things can kind of get a little bit tricky. In terms of empty elements, this really is something that you just kind of have to memorize on which type of elements are empty elements. So for example, this is an empty element because an image element doesn't wrap content to affect it. So its purpose is purely to embed an image in the HTML page in the space that it appears. So for example, this image, we're not wrapping this image element around anything. This image element is actually going within that paragraph, for example, and that's where we want to see our image display. So as we start getting into the code, you'll start to see some examples of this, and feel free to answer or raise your hand if you have any questions on that. With this is really that very basics of HTML, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Louise, who's really going to start to talk to us about the accessibility behind these elements.
Christina, will you continue with the PowerPoint? And that way I can hit my notes. All right, so interestingly enough, you all are ahead of the curve of most developers because a lot of times development is taught without helping developers understand the importance of accessibility. And this term, accessibility, I have it underlined. It's basically underlining the 11 letters between the A and the Y, and so we call it ALLY. And I don't know if you've ever typed accessibility over and over, but I have, and I think I get it wrong every time when I'm typing. So another wonderful reason to use the term ALLY. But ALLY means accessibility. Go to the next slide. And yes, web accessibility means that websites, digital applications, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. I'm going to shut my door real quick because my dogs are loud. Hold on. Sorry about that. So what does this mean? This means that, for example, when I was trying to register for my COVID vaccine, and I am on, I don't know if it was Novant or Atrium's health web page trying to use their form to register for my shot, their form was coded in a very inaccessible way. I had to do a lot of double clicking. Error messages were showing up that were vague and not related to what I was doing. And it was a very inaccessible experience for me, not to mention someone who might not be able to use a mouse to access that form. And I can only imagine what the experience might be for someone using a screen reader. So that's what we mean. This isn't just a nice to have. This is vital for most of us to be able to use the web and have a digital experience that's accessible. So we can go to the next slide. And I just love this quote, and you will see it everywhere if you start researching more and more about accessibility. But Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the web, says the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. And that's how I live, and that's what motivates my career. Okay, and then types of disabilities. So I wanted to just kind of walk through, and we will share this slide deck. So I just want you to know that each of those different disability areas that I'll talk through really quickly, there is a linked video. And I link a video that it's a great set of videos to, really explore these different disabilities. But you always want to remember that accessibility is about people and not about checklists. You will certainly hear a lot about companies like Domino's or Target trying to meet accessibility compliance. And compliance is great, and it's the way we force accessibility, but ultimately it's about people, and that's what these videos are about. So, we have visual disabilities. We're talking anything on a spectrum of blindness, legal blindness, low vision, color blindness, and then hearing, of course. Think about how much of the web is video and other kinds of multimedia content, right? So you want to provide captions and transcripts for your any kind of multimedia content. It's really, really vital with all the podcasting going on right now that podcasters provide transcripts. So motor, so maybe someone is not able to use a mouse. They have a slow response time or maybe limited fine motor control. If you can't use a mouse, how do you interact with a website? And you have to code it in a particular way to make sure that you can navigate a site with the keyboard. And then cognitive, cognitive can be all sorts of, diagnoses from autism, attention deficit, traumatic brain disorder, Down syndrome. But then it can also be other things like memory, problem solving, kind of your verbal comprehension level. All of these tie into cognitive disabilities and also inform a developer and also content author, product manager like Christina. How do we design for cognitive disabilities? Okay, next slide. All right, assistive technologies. So these are the different ways that people can access digital content. And these are the different types of technologies that are that we're trying to code for so that they know how to break content down. And we're going to talk more about that. These are just some examples. We'll talk a lot about screen readers today. Screen readers are very useful for people who are blind. It will read out what's on the site to them. And if you haven't, there's several, and I think I may have linked in our resources, but how people who are blind use screen readers. It's really important that you watch how someone uses a screen reader so that you can understand the barriers to access of a website. And then screen magnification software. or even just, zooming in on your website. You can zoom in on a site. I just showed this to my mom. My mom has failing eyesight. I was like, well, just zoom in your site. She didn't know, Command plus or Control plus. You can zoom that thing up to 400%. So, but are we developing in a way to make that experience accessible for you? Speech input software, motion tracking, eye tracking software, people who are using their eyes to navigate a website. Really, really very interesting, again, to learn from people who are interacting with applications that way or websites that way. And then head pointers. These are sticks that are kind of mounted on the head, and people can use them to push keys or interact with a keyboard or any type of device. So those are just, this is a quick run through. So getting back to how HTML intersects with accessibility. I love this developer, Sarah Sodan. She has a great blog, and I have linked to that for you. But she says semantic HTML is the foundation of a truly accessible web. She also says when you use the proper HTML elements everywhere, it allows different apps and devices to convey your content's meaning to the user so that they know what to expect of it and how to interact with it. If you code using semantic HTML and you are mindful of your application or your website's structure, just like in a history paper, if you're mindful of your outline, that is very helpful to these technologies and to people who are accessing the web in a way other than visually. So it's very important that you code semantic HTML. Okay, so these are the guidelines that just wanted to flow through really quickly. So for websites and applications, what do we expect from them? We want them to be perceivable. We want the information and the interface, what you see and what you interact with as a user. We want those components across the web page to be presentable to users in ways that they can perceive. We want it to be operable. That the user interface components and navigation is able to be operable. So that means that if you are just using a keyboard only, you can still operate the website. You do not have to use a mouse. Understandable. Information and the operation of the user interface must be understandable. And this gets into a lot of content. Making sure that your content is clear and concise. Those are my favorite words as a history teacher, and they're my favorite words as a developer. Clear and concise. And then robust. Content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies like what we were talking about. So if you code with semantic HTML, screen readers, for example, won't understand what's going on and interpret that back to the person who's using the screen reader, more importantly. And I am not going to get into the web content accessibility guidelines, of which there are many. And if you open up their webpage, it looks like a wall of text. There's lots of rules, right? But very interesting ones. But what semantic HTML can tie into is this particular success criteria, which is information and relationships. This is from this particular criteria that developers need to meet. That information, structure, and relationships conveyed through presentation can be programmatically determined or are available in text. And, essentially that means people know when they're interacting with your site how to use it because how you've coded it is very clear, both in text that's visible and in the code that you write. Okay, and as we code, we are going to go through how accessibility integrates into creating this first web page. So we will be talking about page title, headings, images and alt text, links and lists. As we go through, we'll learn how to code them, and then we'll learn why we code them that way. And I don't know, Christina, can you open that video demo?
Yeah. Oh, let's try.
Okay, so before you get started, I just wanted to show you really quickly. This is a screen reader, and I am just looking at DeQ.com. DeQ is a software company that builds really amazing testing tools for developers to be able to test sites so that they can evaluate it for accessibility. Wonderful company, and I am using it to show you how a screen reader can access the site, and you're going to see those words, headings, links. I think it has form controls, but landmarks. And this is actually how people who use a screen reader would interact with the website first. They're not going to read the whole website, because think about it. Do you read the whole website to get down to the information at the bottom? You don't. If you've coded it semantically and using, for example, your headings, which we are going to talk about, then a screen reader user can quickly say, hey, what's the outline of this website? Where do I want to go? And they can see this, and they can actually click on any of those headings, and it would go right to that point in the page. So yes, if you will just show that really quickly, Christina, thank you. Oh, and this is showing a heading structure of their site, and we can come back to this. I'm going to show this live, actually, but this is like a content outline of this website. It's beautiful. Is there sound at all?
I don't think
Oh,
I'm hearing it.
but that's okay. That's okay. Because the most important thing is just showing you that the rotor is what they call it. Oh, here we go. So here's all of the links. We're going to talk about links. Here's all of the headings, and those numbers on the side are telling us whether it's an H1 or an H2. And here's all of the landmarks. And so, again, this is how a blind person who's using a screen reader might interact with the website versus just trying to read everything. And I think that's it.
Great. All right. So looks like we're doing pretty well on time. What I'd like us to do is go ahead and take that quick 5-minute break. Actually, why don't we come back at the 9:40 mark? So that'll give us about 8 minutes. Then we can go ahead and get into coding. So essentially everything that you see here, that wraps up the basics of individual HTML elements. However, they're not quite handy on their own. So now we'll look at how individual elements are combined to form the entire HTML page, as Louise was speaking of, that entire structure that then forms into our landing page. And again, during this time, you're encouraged to follow along, or if you want to sit and watch, it's entirely up to you. We'll share the final code at the end of class, so don't worry about falling behind. The most important part is to see how I'm writing and formatting the code, and also just ask questions in the chat or raise your hand if you ever get lost. All right, so with that, we'll take about 7 minutes now and see you back at 9:40. Alrighty. How about we get a show of hands to let me know if you've returned? Alrighty, awesome. Looks like we've got a good amount of folks who've returned. Okay, so let's go ahead and kick things back off. So right here, we are now going to talk about getting into coding. And I'm gonna leave this next slide up. And what I'd like you to do is you should have, as a prerequisite, gone and created an account on Glitch. Our wonderful Codelab TAs will go ahead and paste this link here that you see on the slide. They're going to put this in the chat for you. So all you need to do is go ahead and copy that link and paste it in your browser. And that will be able to bring you to this specific repository. Awesome. And looks like Louise had just posted that in the chat. So if you go ahead and click that link, and let me walk through this with you so that you can also see it on my screen. All right, so you should come to this page. So this is the HTML part 1 page. And what I want you to do is click this button here at the bottom. It's called Remix This with a little microphone application icon. So when you click Remix This, what that's going to do is create your own unique repository. So for example, you can do whatever you want in this web page. This is your own personal web page to hit the ground running and start coding. Super easy. Glitch has made it. I'm definitely a big fan of Glitch. They've made it really easy for us to not only teach classes in a quick way, but also to help you all in getting started with your fellow projects. So one thing you'll see here in the README is a welcome to our HTML class. This is actually written in Markdown, which is something that's also really cool when you start your coding career. This provides context to users who are just starting off or who might be utilizing a fellow developer's repository and need help how to get their project running. So this is written in Markdown. You'll see here there are things like the hashtag. So this hashtag is actually a H1. We've got the H2. You'll see the 2 hashtags. And then that's H3, which is the three hashtags, which will go into more detail. But if you click that markdown button, that's where you can kind of get some more, you'll be able to see the preview. And this is the preview of our page. So you'll see here, I pasted in a lot of dummy text. This is lorem ipsum. And this is just really, as you start to begin your coding journey, you'll probably be using lorem ipsum a lot. There are some really neat generators out there. For example, there's a cupcake ipsum that you can generate, a whole bunch of cute words that are all about cupcakes. There are also some other ones that are not suitable for work, such as the Samuel Jackson ipsum, which is hilarious. I do not recommend, though, and you did not hear this from me, don't recommend you putting that into your work code. That's a big no-no. You never know what could happen. So yeah, I'll be going ahead, and during the class, you'll notice that I'll say, okay, go back to the README file, copy this line, copy this paragraph, and paste it in your code. So we'll be going through that as we begin coding as well.
Christina, it looks like we have 2 hands raised. Unless they were raised when you asked to check in, I'm not sure, but it says there's 2 hands raised.
Yeah, do
Kathy and Sharon, do you
Mhm.
guys have questions?
no, looks like it might be a leftover. And by the way, to unraise your hand, just click that button one more time and then I'll put your hand down. All right, so this is where we'll be starting our code. And let me make this a little bit bigger. So this is where we'll be starting our coding journey. You'll see here, we've already got a number of items here scaffolded out for you to help you begin. And just going over briefly, I'm going to go back to the slide because what I want to do is make sure you follow these instructions and you're actually able to remix your own project to get started. So let me pause there and raise your hand and keep it raised when you finished these steps so that Louise and I know to continue on.
And again, remember, if you find these steps too frustrating, I have those moments myself every day. We are giving you this project and this code, so you are not losing out on any of the information that we're going to share.
Christina, Louise, Miss Sharon says the link is not working for her.
All right, let's see. Did you just try, Sharon, clicking on the link?
Okay, she's going to try that now.
Great. And how are we doing on those hand raises?
I see 3 thus far.
Okay.
It was 4, and the other disappeared. So I'm hoping it was just a little glitch, if you will.
That was awesome. It's a little glitch.
Okay.
Great, looks like I'm seeing more hands.
Yeah. All right.
And remember, when you've remixed this product, go ahead and raise your hand and keep it raised so that we know to move forward.
We're at 6 hands now. Yay.
Great.
Sharon says it worked when she logged out. Yay.
Oh, great. All right. I'm going to give it one more minute till about 9:50, and then we will go ahead and begin coding. So feel free to lower your hands at 9:50, and then we can go ahead and get into the code. Alrighty. So let me go into my new account. So one thing to take note here, you'll see the code that I provided you all. This is called HTML part 1. And you'll see this item here. It says HTML part 1. When you remix your project, you should see a fake name that was just created, and it should be very unique. So mine says Fate Fluorescent Panther. Yours probably says something else. And if you want, feel free to drop it in the chat if you feel like it's fun, and we can continue on. So I'm just going to go over what you see here. And this entire body, so to speak, you'll see here starting at line 1, which is right here. This is called the doc type HTML. Really, this is just a required preamble. So in the midst of time when HTML was young, probably around 91 to 92, doc types were meant to act as links to a set of rules that the HTML page had to follow to be considered good HTML. That could mean, for example, automatic error checking and a lot of other useful things. However, these days, they really don't do much and are basically just needed to make sure your document behaves correctly. So really, that's all you need to know for doc type, this doc type link for now. Or excuse me, doc type element for now. Next, we're getting into HTML. So this is the HTML element. So this element wraps the entire content of the entire page, and it is sometimes known as the root element. So you'll notice here, and something that's cool about Glitch as well, if you minimize it, you can then see the opening and closing tags, and this gets you to that overall tree hierarchy. So, and you're able to easily see the nested elements within that single element. So this is a good example here, getting back to what we said, that this element wraps around all of the content of the entire page. So you can see that being presented here. By clicking that little arrow, you can open and close that quickly. Next, we are getting into the head. And also for context, you'll see something here, like I put a space in between the HTML and the head. This is really, you don't have to do it this way. You could put them all, line by line. For example, I could start this head over on line 3 if I wanted. That does not matter. That's not going to affect your web page in any way. I'm just doing it so that you all can see the separation of the elements. So the head element, this acts as a container for all of the things that you want to include on the HTML page that isn't content you're showing to your page viewers. So this includes things like keywords, page description that you want to appear in the search results, any CSS to style our content, character set declarations. There's a lot that you can do here in the head that then provides further context for screen readers, things like that. You'll see here next within this, and what we like to call this, again, a nested element, is the meta tag. This meta tag is an element that sets the character set of your document, and you should use this to set it to UTF-8. So UTF-8 includes most characters from the vast majority of written languages. Essentially, it can now handle any textual content you might put on it. Really, there's no reason not to set this, and also this can help avoid some problems later on. Usually when you start your coding journey, often this will be a scaffold already created for you, so you don't.
Christina, we're having trouble hearing you. It keeps freezing and breaking up a bit.
Sorry about that. Looks like I lost connection for a second. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me share screen again.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so getting back to it. So the title element sets the title of your page. This is the title that appears in the browser tab that the page is loaded in. So for example, if this were not a glitch page, this title, my test page, would actually appear right here. So that's what that title is representing. So technically my title, if I say title test page, it will say title test page here. And what I can do is go ahead and show you a preview of that.
If you just
Louise,
give us the glasses beside the, yeah, and go to open in a new window.
thank you.
Cool.
So there you can see the title that we have here that's called my test page, and you'll see it at the top of this tab called my test page. If I wanted to change that to Codelab HTML class, you'll see it just changed up there. And that's another cool thing about Glitch is this does something called an autosave, which means it will automatically save whatever you type in. And then also it does a live loading. So it shows you a live preview. Now, once we start to enter in our rest of our body, you'll then start to see this populate. It also is a preview here for you. So if I just say, you'll see it also populate here. So depending on your view and how you want to look at it, you can click this show button and show it next to the code, which is what I have open right now, or you can have it pop out into a new window, which we'll be showing you both examples during this time.
And Christina, can I just interject really quickly just about the title? So this is kind of point one for how to integrate accessibility into your web page development. The title, as you can tell from what Christina explained and what you can actually see, is that you can see the title of the page in that tab, and that is really useful information. But if you're using a screen reader, if you leave that tab blank, the screen reader is not going to get read out to them the title of the page that they are on. And this is pretty vital, as you can imagine, if you're hitting a page that you would want to know what the page is. So always make sure you include a page title in your development. Make sure that it is unique. So the way Christina changed the title to be Codelab HTML class, that is unique. It lets the screen reader know what the page is. The unique information first, which is about Codelab. And the other thing to keep in mind, and you'll see this when we get into coding, but usually page titles match or are very close to our heading or H1 tag, because that page title and an H1 tag, which is a heading tag, that first big title tag on a website, you might see that, but that doesn't mean that a screen reader would know that that's an important piece of information unless you've marked it up. So development, good accessible development tip number one, put that page title in, make it unique, make it concise.
Exactly. Thank you, Louise. And So what we're going to do now, class, y'all should already have this open and you should already have this scaffold created. What I want you to do on the title is go ahead and change this title to something that you want your web page to be. What do you want to call your landing page? So for me, I'm just going to say, I'm going to call this Christina's portfolio. This is something that I want to have as my starting page for my future products. When I start to create more code, this is where I want to direct users to. I want them to come to my landing page and be able to see all of the projects that I've worked on using code, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You'll also notice that we've closed the head out here. So if I minimize this, again, you can see that the meta and the title tags are nested within the head element. So pretty cool there. Now we're getting to
Christina, I'm sorry, one more thing.
Yeah.
So tip 2 for creating a web page before we even get into the content that we see is that we want to set a language attribute to the English. And that is going to look like this. Well, you probably can just add that in for me, but I'll put it in chat also. So if anyone wants to copy and paste. So this is another really required piece of good web development. Screen readers can read in a lot of different languages. So if a page doesn't specify the language, so we are specifying using this particular code, EN for English, that the screen reader is going to read the web page in English. Otherwise, it's going to attempt to read it in the user's default language. So if you have a French speaker, their operating system, their computer that they're using is going to say, well, this person likes to read everything in French, and so they're going to try and read your website with a French accent. And that is pretty funny sounding. So you don't want to do that. It's awkward. So you always want to set the primary language of the website with this called lang attribute, which is going to tell the screen reader, please read this website in English. Now, just really quickly, we'll come back to this when we get into content, because we can actually tell a screen reader, but only read this paragraph or this sentence or this word in French. So we'll show you that later.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so next, what I want us to then talk about is the body that you see here. So getting into the body, this is where we are going to, again, this is where it contains all the context that you want to show to the web users when they visit your page. So whether that's text, images, video games, any playable audio tracks, whatever else, that's where you would go ahead and paste in within the body tag. And another thing that I also want to point out before we start diving in is the way that we're formatting this code is also very important. When I was doing web development and we had folks come in for an interview, and we knew that they were a junior developer trying to break into the industry, this is one of the basics that we looked for, is how are you formatting your code? Is your code clean? Does it make sense the way that you're formatting it? So for example, you'll notice here as we start to get coding, pay attention to how I use my tabs to start nesting our elements. If I were to have something that looked like this, technically it's still nested within that head tag, but it's all on the same line, so to speak. So this makes it very hard for developers who are also coding with you to read what's being formatted here. So it's very important that you make sure everything is readable and those items are nested within each other. So just pay attention to that as we begin coding. Okay, so if we don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and start kicking us off into the code. All right. So what I'm going to do here is, and what another cool thing about Glitch is this format this file button, and that will essentially clean up your code formatting for you. I recommend trying it out without it. Sometimes it can be used as a crutch before you begin, and this will give you really good practice to just try nesting those elements and using those tabs in the proper way. So after hitting enter, I am now going to start coding the header. So I'm going to use the brackets, type in header, and the minute I enter in that closing bracket here, you'll notice that Glitch goes ahead and closes out the element for you, which is really, really nice. A lot of text editors that you use today, such as Visual Studio Code, other coding repositories, they'll oftentimes do this for you, and that's something that you'll have to set up as well. But it's really great that they're able to provide this. It just takes away the ease of some of the code as you get started.
Christina?
Yes.
We have someone asking, what is UFF hyphen capital B, or is that an 8? I think it's an 8.
UTF-8.
Yeah, can you see that? There it is.
Oh, yes.
It's
So yeah, that's a good question. So this, the UTF-8 is really including the vast majority of written languages. So essentially it can handle any contextual content you might put on it. So really it's just a meta tag, and that's something you'll see as well. It's just a piece of data, a metadata you'll hear, that helps provide context for really the website to know more about how to read this page. I believe the UTF stands for, and Louise, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it stands for Universal Text Font or Formatting. It's one of those.
Yeah, and I just put a link into the chat for everyone that explains UTF-8, but I also wanted to share W3 Schools is one of many. I also like MDN, Microsoft Developer Network pages, but this W3 Schools is a place where you can go for information about coding.
Unicode transformation format.
And yes,
I would have never got that.
No, and you know what, Christina, that raises an important point. There is so much to know in development. You don't hold it all in your head. You learn how to Google, and Googling is a skill, and it's a skill you wear with pride, because you can't hold all this information in your head.
Yep, exactly. Yep, Google has always been a longtime friend of mine in web development. Okay, so we just started coding the header, and the header HTML element represents introductory content. It's typically a group of introductory or navigational aids. So it may contain some heading elements, but it also could contain, for example, your portfolio logo. It could have a search form. It could have an author name and other elements like that. So from here, from the header, you'll notice I want to be between the first closing bracket and the start of the opening closing bracket to the header. So I want my cursor to be right in between these two brackets. And here's what I'm going to do next. After we have that separation and my cursor is in between, go ahead and hit enter, and then hit enter one more time. So you should see some formatting that looks like this. And I want to put my cursor now right where it's at on line 12, right in the middle there. I just hit the tab button because I want to now have an element within my content that is nested. And this is where we're going to introduce our first heading tag, which Louise will talk about the accessibility piece here in a minute. So right again, enter in that opening bracket, type in H1 and close it out. And you'll see there, voila, it went ahead and created that separation for you. So now I'm going to title this My Portfolio Header. So really quickly, just giving you an overview of what a heading is. So the header tag we just went through. Now we have the heading, which is right here. And the H1, there are many headings. It ranges from H1 all the way down to H6. And the H1 to H6 HTML elements represent the 6 levels of section headings. So H1 is the highest section level and H6 is the lowest. One thing that we'll often see coders do is they use these heading tags to resize the text. And that is a big no-no. The heading here is really to display importance on your web page. So really what we're signifying here is this H1 tag that says My Portfolio Header. This is, to me, on my page, the most important thing that I want you to see when you come to my page. I think it's always beneficial to avoid skipping those heading levels. Louise can talk more on the accessibility again, but you always want to start with H1, followed by an H2, and so on. And then also, best practice here is to only use one H1 page per view. So it should concisely describe the overall purpose of the content of this page. So you'll know that when you come to my page, you're going to see something called My Portfolio. And even better, to make this make more sense, let's be descriptive. Okay, so now we have Christina's portfolio, and feel free to add your name on this header line. And what this is saying is when you come to my page, the most important thing about this is you're at my portfolio. And Louise, I will now pass it off to you to talk about some accessibility pieces.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that what you just did, now you have matched your heading that we can see to your page title, which is really good form. And if it was not quite exact, that's fine, but it's very close to what the page title is. So that is great in terms of your page title. Headings, just from a design perspective, the way I got into web development was through building WordPress sites, and I used drag and drop design packages to help me build a website because I didn't know how to code at the time. And one of the ways that I would style my text was by selecting the different headings, because I was not aware of the fact that, yes, headings are very important for information. They're very, very important for screen reader users. Basically, headings markup will help guide a user through a web page. And actually, I want to show you really quickly. I'm going to try and share my screen real quick. Thank you. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so what I want to show you, I'm sorry, I'm moving my Zoom out of the way. I'm going to use a plugin, and this is a website that you can see again. It's the DQ website. It is visually nice and clean, very clear visually, again, where content is located. and how it's partitioned out. I can use this plugin called Web Developer Content and look at the document outline. And this is the information that you are sending when you code well to a screen reader user. So I want you to notice you have the one, like Christina was saying, one H1 tag. You have then going down in a nice clean order, some H2 tags, which to me indicate that these are all, sections of a website of equal importance in content. So we've got latest news, accessibility, leadership, their ACTS plugin, and then you can see the other headings, H3s, going into H4s, going into H5s. I don't think they have an H6, but you can see this is what we're saying with headings. So that's why you don't use headings to style something. You use CSS, which we have that class coming up, and that's how you style text if you want it to be really big or look a certain way. Headings are so that we can provide a nice structure to a web page. All right, I will turn it back to you, Christina.
All righty, thank you. Let me make sure I got the right one up. Great. Okay, so we just finished coding the header, and what we're going to touch base now is the navigation element. So go ahead and hit enter, and hit enter a couple times. And what I want us to do is just have, again, that separation, that line of separation between the body and the header. So here I'm on line 17. You don't have to be right on line 17, but I just want to show you that separation in those elements. So now what we're going to do is code the nav. So what I'm going to do is have my bracket again, type in nav, short for navigation, close the bracket, and again, that closes the element itself for me. I'm going to hit enter twice. And within the nav, this is now where I'm going to code my navigational pieces. But before I do that, I want to give you a little more context on what the nav is. So the nav here is an HTML element that represents a section of the page whose purpose is to provide navigational links. So either within the current document, which is what we see here, this is the current document, or to other documents. So if I wanted to, for example, link out to my Google website, I could do that as well. Some common examples of navigation sections are things like menus, as well as table of contents, and also indexes. So that is navigation in a nutshell. Next, we're going to talk about unordered lists.
Actually, Christina, I'm sorry, I needed to unmute. Before we move into lists, I just want to mention, so there is something called landmarks, and Christina using this navigation element in HTML, it reminded me that we definitely want to talk about landmarks on a page. So much like we were talking about with heading elements or H1s, H2s, H3s, screen reader users rely on us to provide landmarks so that, again, they don't have to read through the whole page. They can pull up using their rotor on their screen reader a way to break down the content of the page so that they can very quickly get to it. And landmarks is one of those things. So it allows a screen reader to skip content in the web page to get to where they want to go. Landmarks help map out sections of the web page in the layout. The most common landmarks that I think would make sense for us is what Christina has here. a header, navigation, main content, and we'll put that in just a second, and then a footer. And all of our text content is going to be within these landmarks. And that way a screen reader user can, pull it up. They can say, what's the landmarks on this web page? Oh, you know what I need is actually going to be in the footer. Maybe they need contact information. Contact information a lot of times is in a footer. So they want to just skip right to the footer. So they're going to click on the footer landmark, and that'll take them to our footer element. So that is another important aspect of the web page.
Louise, I have a question for you. Will the screen reader automatically know what element is a landmark?
Will the screen reader automatically know what element? Yes. So for example, your header and your navigation elements have this information implicitly available for a screen reader. Now, sometimes you'll see something like role equals navigation, right? And when you put role equals navigation, you are providing that landmark to a screen reader. However, the HTML element nav, NAV, that you see up here, because it's good semantic HTML, it's going to send that role equals navigation to the screen reader, and you don't have to put any extra code in there. So you get to clean up that code, make it more concise, and the screen reader knows that this nav element has a role of navigation.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to talk about unordered lists. So I just hit the tab button. Again, we're nesting within the navigation, and I type in UL for unordered list, and I closed it out, and you'll see it went ahead and pre-nested for me. And I'm going to continue coding because I want to talk about the unordered list, again, the UL, and the list items within that, the LI. So again, opening bracket, I close it, and you'll see our LI has just been created. So go ahead and copy this. Actually, keep it as is, and let me go back and explain to you what we just did here. So within the navigation, again, if we close it, you'll see it's nested. We have our UL, and the UL element represents an unordered list of items. You'll see here in our preview, that first little bullet has just been created. And typically this is, again, rendered as a bulleted list. The LI that you see here, that stands for list item. So this is the first item in the list. Next, what I'm going to do is within this list item, go ahead and hit enter one more time. Enter twice. Hit the tab button, because we are now going to list within our list item our navigation. This is going to have our helpful links that provide us with the basis of our navigation. So within this, go ahead and have your opening bracket. Type in A. A symbolizes a link. Hit space. Type in href equals, and we're going to do our quotation marks. And you'll notice that when you hit the quotation marks, it automatically closes the quotation mark for you. And then within that quotation mark, go ahead and use the hashtag button. And then we're going to close out our bracket. So this is another line of code. And what I want us to put within the opening and closing of our bracket is home. And voila, what do you see there? We now have a link that says home. And just to talk about that, essentially what we did a little bit further is what we did is we went ahead and created a link. And what this is doing is this is now linking us out to a specific page or a specific point within our current page. You'll notice a lot of times when you first start developing this here, anything with a hashtag, that's not going to do anything, right? You're not going to go anywhere within your route. And something that you can see here as well, if you look at this bottom left corner of the site, watch what happens when I click home. You can now see that entire URL structure, and you'll see there the name of my website / and then the hashtag. Well, that is targeting this hashtag here. It's not specifying I want to go out anywhere, and the basis of starting off our links to our web page.
Do you want me to speak a little bit to the accessibility about lists and links, or do you want to?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we can start with lists since that was the first thing that we created. The reason why we want to put information in lists, we can certainly code it in a way that we don't use a list. We could just use paragraph tags and put some spacing between the items in our list. However, if you code it using the unordered list, the list tags, then screen readers will announce it as a list. And think about that for a second. If you are a sighted user, when you see a list of items in your head, you immediately say, okay, there's a list of items related to a topic, and there's 6 items. And you can see that, and you automatically make that connection. Of course, a blind user would not make that connection unless you have coded it in such a way, which is as Christina has coded it, using the UL tag, the unordered list, and the list item tag. And so a screen reader will then announce it as a list, how many items are in that list. So it's really important to use semantic markup for creating lists. There's 3 kinds of lists. The unordered list, which produces those bullet points that you see with Christina's example. Ordered lists, which would create a list of items using numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or description lists. And honestly, I don't use description lists all that often, but unordered lists and ordered lists I use all the time, every day in my code. Now, in terms of links, so that is the A tag that Christina just coded. To make an accessible link, you want to put it inside of an element. So we have it inside of an element. We have it inside of a list item element. And then you want to provide a valid href value. Now, what Christina put in with the hashtag is how users, not users, but how developers, we kind of use it like a placeholder to say, hey, we'll come back and put in where we want people to go in just a second. Now, you can be sloppy and accidentally publish your code, and it would get hit if you were, auditing a website for accessibility. It would be raised as an issue that there's links that are going nowhere, right? And that's because screen reader users, it will read out that a particular body of text or the element that the link is embedded in has a path to somewhere. So you want to make sure not to leave those hashtag elements in there. And that is related to, you want to have a very clear understanding of what the text or where the link is going.
Louise?
Yeah.
We have Miss Greer asking, what does line 20 say after the equal sign? Quotes, question mark, quote. There's a whole long
Good
thing.
call, yes. And it is a hashtag. It is just a hashtag. And that is the placeholder.
Yep.
So you can see that Christina's code produces a link, and this is good. We know that that's what that bit of text is. It doesn't actually do anything. The last bit I just want to emphasize is that the link text should be really clear. I think I was just saying this. In indicating where you are going to take that user if they click it. And that's good accessibility, and that's also good usability. We all want to know where we go if we click the link, right? So we want to make sure to include text that is very clear about what's going to happen if they click it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And another thing too, right? Since this is considered a placeholder, what I want us to try now doing is actually linking out to a specific web page. But before we do that, I want to make sure that whenever I click on that link, I want it to open up in a separate tab, because that's another thing about your portfolio and creating your portfolio. You always want to try to keep the user on your page. So you don't want to direct them out to a specific link while losing their access to your web page. So what I also want us to do is add the attribute target just after the quotations here equals opening and closing quotes, type in the underscore, and then blank. So nothing is going to happen right now. And once you've done that, I'm going to give you just a little bit of time to type that in. And essentially what this is doing, which is pretty cool, this is going to now reference you out to a different page, okay? So what I want us to do is go ahead and type in within the hashtag. You'll see I have the hashtag highlighted. Type in google.com. And now what I want you to do is go ahead and click that link. Oh, looks like it's not opening. Give me 1 second.
Do you need to put the HTTPS?
Let's try that. Oh, okay. It's blocked. Well, ignore that. Typically what would happen there is, let me try it here actually.
There you go. Yeah.
There we go. So yeah, typically, I guess it doesn't like it on this side-by-side view, but if you go click the show button and you click in a new window, that'll bring up your portfolio in a separate window. And what that will do, let me try adding that back again. There we go. So essentially what just happened there is, if I make this a little smaller, we added that attribute target, and that's targeting this specific link to open up into a separate browser window. In terms of why they call it underscore blank, I really don't know why, but that's the way to do it. So just keep that in mind. So now what we're going to do is continue linking the remainder of our portfolio. And this, I want you to do another fun trick for Glitch. Go ahead and highlight the opening and closing list. And once you have that highlighted, go ahead and select format this selection. And typically what should happen, right, is this will clean it up for you. So that wasn't a great example because it's already formatted. So yay on us, we formatted it correctly. But say, for example, if I did something like this, right? And then I highlighted that again and I hit format. Oh, it still likes that. Typically, what I wanted to happen, right, was to have it as this formatting. So you should already have this. If you highlight it, you hit format, it will automatically format that for you, as I was talking about earlier. Now what I want us to do is go ahead and let's remove this link to Google. Let's put the hashtag back and copy this here. Go ahead and hit copy. So you can right click if you want to copy it, or some command shortcut keys. You can hit, if you're on a Mac, which I am, you can hit Command C for copy. And then pasting is Command V. If you're on a Windows, you can hit Control C or Control V as in Victor, and that will copy and paste for you. So after line 21, go ahead and hit enter. And I want you to paste, oh, that's not the one I wanted. Copy this, copy all of this list, and go ahead and paste that again. And I want you to do that 2 more times. So what we've just done is we've created 4 different links that are all called home. And I want us to change these navigational links to now make sense for my portfolio. So I'm going to have a home page, which is this, what we're seeing right here. I also eventually will want to tell them a little bit about me. So I'll have an about me page. Next, I want to have a project page. And this will say, hey, this is all the projects that I've created during my coding journey. And then finally, I want to have a contact page. Here's how you can get in touch with me so that you can hire me for your next company or your next job. This is going to be very helpful as well for people to get in touch with you, networking, things like that. So at the end of this first journey, what we've created here was the header, and we've created the navigation. And then within that navigation, we've created a number of links. We've created 4 links within our navigation: the home, the about me, projects, and contact information. Next, what we're going to do is get into the main, what Louise was referring to earlier, the main body of our landing page. So after line 32, after nav, I'm going to hit enter twice. Again, that's really just to help separate the content for you to visually see it. And I'm going to have my opening tag and type in main. And again, it closes this out for you. And I want to give you a little more context on main. So the main element really represents the dominant content of the body of an element. So you'll see here on line 9, we're still in the body of the page. It's everything that you see. If I go back to this view, this entire web page here, that is the entire body. Now, what you're going to see afterwards, this is going to be the main content. We're going to have a lot of content here. That will be the main content, which wraps around and represents the dominant content of the body. It is separate from the header and it's separate from the navigation. Okay, so we are at line 35 and I'm going to hit enter one more time. just to, again, to give you all that separation visually. And now what I'm going to do is write my first article. So I'm going to say article as the first element. And again, that closes the article element out for me. And just to give you a little more context about the article HTML elements represents a self-contained composition in a document, page, application, or website, and is intended to be independently distributable or reusable. So some examples of an article include a blog entry or a blog post, a user submitted comment, anything that is independent and reusable. So just keep that in mind, an independent item of content that is reusable or repeatable. Within that, we are now going to nest within our article. And this is where we're going to be adding a couple of descriptive items within our article, including our second heading, which is going to be our H2 tag. So type in H2, and you'll see that formats very nicely for you. And I'm going to call this article heading. Feel free to call this whatever you want as it starts to relate to your portfolio. This again is signifying to our webpage that Christina's portfolio is the most important piece here. The heading 2, this is the second important piece that I want you to understand on my webpage. So now that we have the H2, this is where within the article, I went ahead and hit enter. And I'm going to hit enter 2 more times. So after the H2, now what I want us to do is code a specific item of text. And what we've done here, if you went ahead and remixed this project, within the README, you're going to see here a lot of, again, lorem ipsum, or that dummy text that we were just talking about at the beginning of class. So go ahead and within the HTML, we're now at line 41. And after my H2 heading, I now want to have some form of content that describes my portfolio. So because I'm pasting in a lot of content, and this is going to be a paragraph, I'm going to use the paragraph tag. So I use the opening and closing brackets with the P, and that went ahead and closed it out for me. And now what I'm going to do is go to the readme.md file, copy this first paragraph here, go back to the index.html, scroll down to where you had that opening and closing P tag, and go ahead and paste in that line of comment. So now we have officially our first article, and within that article, we have our H2, our header, and then we have our first line of paragraph text. So in terms of the paragraph, again, we've gone over what the paragraph is. Essentially, it just represents a paragraph. Now what I'm going to do is get into my next heading. So keep in mind, we still want to be within the article, opening and closing tag, but we want to hit after the P tag, the closing paragraph tag. This is going to be my subsection within my article. So knowing my article, I want this to be the third most important thing that folks see. So I'm going to give this an H3 tag. And this will be a subsection. Again, as we start to grow our portfolios, feel free to name this whatever you want and have as much fun with it as you possibly can for this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in 2 different paragraphs within this subsection. So all I'm going to do is have the opening P, which will close it out for me. I'm going to go back to my README file. I'm going to take this second one. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to scroll down back to that opening and closing P tag. I'm on line 50 if you're following along. And then I'm going to paste that within my file. Now you'll see here if your pasting did something a little bit wonky like mine did. Let's see if it reformats it. And it didn't. One day we'll see it in action, but I don't like that extra space. So I went ahead and just removed that extra space here.
Christina?
Yeah.
Miss Greer said she typed in the paragraph on the box and the rest of the information is not there. How do I get it back?
The rest of the information is not there. Did you copy this and you're saying the information is gone? Let's see.
So Kathy sent a line of help saying, click on another line and it will come back from Miss Greer.
I typed in the paragraph on the box.
She said she missed a few steps, so it sounds like she's on track now.
Okay, great. Great, so here is our line of content, and what we can also do, Louise, if you want to go ahead and drop in that dummy text into the chat, feel free to do that as well. Feel free, as long as we have a paragraph tag with just whatever text you want to put in there, make sure it has the opening tag and the closing tag. All right. Next, after what we see here is our article. We are now going to hit enter a couple times. I'm now on line 53. And what I'm going to do now is add in one more paragraph. So what you want to do, if you want to make this easy, go ahead and copy this. Copy what you see here. Hit enter. And again, that subsection now should have 2 paragraphs. Okay.
Sorry, Christine, I realized I'm in the final version, so I'm not seeing the lorem ipsum. So I'm going to open up the initial version.
Okay. Yeah, also, if you're trying to find the text, if you click this readme.md file, this is the dummy text that we're using. So feel free to just copy that and paste it when you go to the index.html. Feel free to copy that over. And it looks like Louise just pasted that dummy text in the chat. So if you want to copy that, just make sure it's within the opening and closing tag of the paragraph element.
So there's 2
All right.
example paragraphs in the chat that you can copy.
Perfect, thank you. Oh, and now we have a guest appearance from my cat, Luna.
Yay, Luna.
She's trying to step on my keyboard. All right, come on. Okay, so now what we're gonna do after hitting enter, I'm on line 57, and I'm still in my article. And what I wanna do here is create my second subsection. And this is where we're gonna have a little more accessibility play into it, which Louise will be elaborating on. So right now, what I want us to do is create that H3 heading. You'll see that open and close for us. And then we're gonna have a nested element within our H3. So I'm saying now, can you say, and this is what we call a span tag. So opening bracket, type in span, type in lang for language equals opening and closing quotes. And within that opening and closing quote, you're going to say FR, and FR stands for French. It's the French acronym. We are going to close that element, and you'll notice that span has already closed out for us. So still staying within the span, go ahead and type in opening and closing quote and say bonjour. BONJOUR. Now within this, that means we are specifically targeting bonjour, and the span is targeting this word. So I want to now step out of the span. All right, so after the span, we need to close out this sentence. So I'm saying, can you say bonjour correctly? So at the bottom here, you should see, can you say bonjour correctly? And now I'm going to pass it off to Louise to talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so this has to do with something called the language of parts. And what that means is in our head element, we specified that the entire web application was going to be in English. And that means that the screen reader knows that it's going to read everything on this site in English. However, if we want it to read bonjour with a French accent, we can put these spans around any bit of content, any of the parts of the content, and specify for the screen reader, hey, switch to French real quick. And that way, it would read, can you say bonjour correctly, versus pronouncing bonjour with an English accent, and it may actually trip up over the word trying to apply English phrasing to or an English accent to this word bonjour. So that is important for accessibility. Anywhere where you have parts of your site that are in another language, please specify what language that's in, using one of these span tags around your content, and the lang attribute specifying the language that it should be pronounced in.
Yeah, thank you for that descriptor. That's great. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to code the remainder of our article. And this is going to be exactly following the 2 steps above. So what I want you to do is go ahead and highlight all of this here, hit copy, and just below the can you say bonjour correctly opening and closing header, what I want you to do is hit enter and go ahead and paste. So now what we'll have here is we have overall, we have our portfolio, we have our navigation, we have our H2, some text, we have our H3, which is our subsection. We have 2 paragraphs within that. And then we have our other H3, can you say bonjour correctly, with 2 additional paragraphs. And this is, again, all within our 1 article tag. So if I go up here to our very top of our code and I hit this minimize button on the article, you can now see that cleanly all bucketed within and nested within this article tag. That to me, if you mess up somewhere, this is a good helpful tool to try and minimize things where you can to see it and make sure that you're nesting correctly.
And Christina, will you go to your portfolio page, the tab, and use your web developer plugin and look at document outline? Go to outline. Yours looks a little different, but that's okay. Just go to outline. Yeah. And that's interesting that yours is different. Maybe go to information on the top. Yeah. There we go. Go to view document outline.
Oh, that's great.
Ladies, we have a question. How do you minimize, from Kathy?
Yeah, let me show you that. So yeah, Kathy, if you go up to the opening, let's try this. Go up to the opening article tag. And over to that same, on that same line, you'll see line item 36. That means that's where the opening article is beginning. Yours might be a little bit a different number depending on how you spaced yours out. And you'll see just right to the right of the 36, you'll see a little down arrow. If you click that down arrow, that is how you minimize your opening and closing article tag. If you click that arrow again, that will expand the article. So getting back.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, so getting back to this piece, please.
Yeah, so using that plugin, it's called Web Developer, and I have linked it in our resources page at the end of our PowerPoint. So you can just, add it to your Chrome browser, and on any website, you can play around with using it. But we have just analyzed the portfolio page, and you can see a nice, beautiful structure where we have one H1 tag, followed by an H2 tag, and then a couple of H3 tags. So that is very nice. And if we were using a screen reader and I pulled up a rotor, so that is the screen that says how many headings are on this page, it would say exactly this. That there's one H1 called Christina's Portfolio, one H2 called Article Heading, two H3s, subsection, can you say bonjour correctly? So this is really good form.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next what we're gonna do, and don't worry folks, I know we're getting close on time. If you've got some more time, feel free to stay. We're almost done coding our landing page. We've got an article left and we have a footer left. So what we're gonna do next, or if you have to drop, don't worry, we'll send the assets out directly after this. So what we're gonna do next here is after the article tag, go ahead and hit enter. I hit enter twice. I want you to see that separation here. And what I'm going to do is use something called an aside. So I'm going to use the aside element. So type in aside, and that should open and close for you. And really the aside HTML element represents a portion of a document whose content is only indirectly related to the document's main content. So we had, again, that main content, and this is something that's off to the side. You'll typically see this a lot in news articles or news web pages that you go to. They'll usually have the main content, and then off to the side, that's where they will have an aside tag. So this typically is indirectly related to the document's main content, and asides are frequently represented as, again, sidebars or call-out boxes. So within the aside, I want you to hit enter twice, and within the aside element, go ahead and hit tab because we want to follow that semantic structuring. And within the aside, I want us to have another header. This is going to be an H2 header. So this is signifying to our browser that this is more important than the subsections that you see here. The number one important thing is my portfolio. My second important is the article heading. And now off to the side, I want you to see my third title, which is also the second most important thing. So we're going to call this the related. Toolbar. So if I scroll down, oh, sorry, I actually forgot forgot to add the heading. So go ahead and add your H2 heading. And then type in that related toolbar. And there you go. You'll also notice again where people get tripped up a little bit is the font size, right? So this signifies it's more important than these elements here. So within the aside tag, go ahead after the H2 closing tag, hit enter. I hit enter 3 times. And what we're going to do here is we're going to throw in some helpful links. And these links, don't worry, I will provide this code at the very end. But again, we are just going to show you a different example of a different ordered list. So first we showed you the unordered list, which is the bullets. Now I want to show you an ordered list. So again, we're going to do the bracket. Instead of UL for unordered list, we're typing in OL for ordered list. And now what I'm going to do within that ordered list, I'm still going to use the same LI tag as I did before, opening and closing. And now at the very bottom here, you'll see that number 1 that's just laid out for us. Within the LI, go ahead and hit enter twice. Hit the tab because we want to be nested within the LI. And this is going to be our other link. So feel free, for the sake of time, go up to this original link here and go ahead and copy these items that you see here originally. That's okay. You can change this to whatever you want as we start to proceed forward. So within this, what I would do is actually, I'm just going to copy that single A. So go ahead and copy this. If you want to copy the whole thing, go for it. But I just copied that first A and I hit enter. So go ahead now, you should have an ordered list with a link and then our A. And within that A, we're going to see a link that's home. I'm going to change this to something else. I'm going to say learn web development. And that now should update for me. That can be whatever useful links or references that you want off to the side of your web page. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to copy it, hit enter, and I'm going to paste this a couple more times for you. Oh, paste. Great. So now you'll see three items here. I'm going to say, let's say beyond the basics. And then we'll have another link that talks about CSS, my journey. So this is, again, the related toolbar that's off to the side. And if you follow us for part 2, this is where we're now going to start getting into the styling of the web page. So this is where you would see the main content, everything that you see here, right? We would have our portfolio header. We would have our navigation that would be styled. We would have the article, the main body of the article. And then off to the side, we would style it as the related toolbar off to the right. What we're going to do next is, after we see the aside, so that completes our aside. So again, if I go and minimize, you'll see all of that is nested. And this also completes our main tag. So we have just completed the main body of content for our landing page. However, we're not done. The remaining item that we need to put in here is our footer. And again, just to give you a little bit more context, after the main, go ahead and click that opening bracket, type in footer, and that should close out for you. And while you're typing that, just a little more context about the footer. The footer element represents a footer for its nearest sectioning content or sectioning root element. So a footer typically contains information about the author of the section, any type of copyright data, or even helpful links related to documents. So if we wanted here, we could put out all of our references that we have provided for you in class today. That's an item that we could do. But for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and just keep this very simple. And we'll just write some pretty simple text here within a paragraph element. And we're going to say copyright 2050 by nobody. And we're going to say all rights reversed. So this is just, something silly that you can put, but essentially this signifies the remainder or the final and really that concludes our coding for today. If you follow up,
mention one more thing, Christina. I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
We're tight on time. I'm going to put this link in the chat. We will follow up on images when we do our CSS course, but I want to make sure with HTML, it is very, very important that images, when we code images, that we provide alternative text so that a screen reader doesn't read out. If it comes to a photo in your site, it doesn't read out the file name of the photo, which could be, 6274372-abc.jpg, right? You want it to say, this is a grumpy cat photo, and there's a whole art to writing alternative text. But it's very important. It's one of the most important things to keep in mind with semantic HTML. There's an example in the chat, and we will incorporate images for our CSS class.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And really, folks, that concludes our meetup for today. I would love for you all to join us next time. We're again coordinating with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library to provide you that part 2 into CSS, where we'll really be building upon the HTML that we created today. Really want to have a big shout out and thank you to Charlotte Mecklenburg Public Library for hosting Queen City Bytes, and to our wonderful assistants, Christy, La, and Kurt. And of course, I want to thank Louise for being our accessibility advocate. It has been such a pleasure working with you all today. And finally, we want to thank everyone who's joined the class. If not for you all, we wouldn't be having these classes. We love to give back to the community. We want you all to empower yourselves to take this next step towards your career and learning how to code. So if you ever have questions, or you want to reach out to the entire user group here at QC Bytes, our internal org, feel free to use our email address, shoot us a message, and that will go to all of us. Also, I know that the CML would also like to have some final wrap-up words as well, so I will pass it off to CML.
And thank you, Christina. Thank you, Louise. Thank you so much again for joining us on a humid Saturday. We would love to get your feedback for those of you who attended this workshop today. I am going to put a survey in the chat that will come. It's anonymous, that if you have a chance to fill it out, we would really appreciate it. You should be able to access it now. Let me see if that worked. And we'd like to get your feedback on the captioning if you did turn that feature on today, because that was one of the first times we had enabled that. We also want to hear what kind of programs you'd like to see from the library and from our wonderful partners, Queen City Bites, because we don't know what to offer if we don't hear from you all. We, again, just appreciate you all coming again and seeing us virtually. Please continue to check the library's calendar for future Codelab programs. If you would like, let me see if I can drop the library's calendar into the chat. All of our programs never require a library card to attend. Most of our programs, never say never. Most of our programs never require a card to attend. They are always free. You have to register usually. And right now, all of our programs continue to be virtual, but we please just encourage you to continue to check our calendar and see what we continue to offer. We're, like Christina and Louise said, we are meeting to discuss a follow-up to this class for CSS. So again, we will also be sending out the slides, I believe, and the code for this class today. And we would love to hear from you guys. And La, if you had anything to add, or if I missed anything, please let me know.
Thank you all. Once again, the bit.ly link is active and is currently in the chat. Thank you to Christy for that. And now we just posted our library link so that you can register for anything else that we have upcoming. As Christy said, they are always free. Please make sure that you register with an accurate and current email address, because that is how we contact you for you to receive all the information, including the Zoom link or YouTube live link or Facebook Live, whatever we're offering at the time. Again, we thank you, Christina and Louise. Here are all the resources that our wonderful Queen City Bites ladies are offering. And we can't wait to hear from you in the future, and be well and be safe.
And if you,
Awesome.
yeah, and if you did not sign up on the library's website, you can I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Please feel free to contact me, and I can send out the link to you. But if you registered on the library's website, we should have your email address, and we'll be sending those things out as well.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. And all of the repository, the glitch repository will be shared in this PowerPoint. So all you need to do is go to the very end of this PowerPoint for all of these resources here, not only on what we use in class, we've got a couple of free self-learning courses to go at your own pace. And then of course, we have a bunch of accessibility items for you to keep in mind, as well as those testing plugins that we shared today. There are also additional plugins we didn't have time to go over, but go ahead and take a look, download them, and start poking around and having fun with it. But yeah, that concludes our class. So thank you all very much for your time.